right, good afternoon, everybody. It is great to be here in person. Thank you, everyone, for investing the time with us this afternoon. Our topic today is building generational talent, the infrastructure workforce opportunities in Tennessee and beyond. My name is Austin Ramirez. I'm the president and CEO of Husco International. We are a global family-owned business that's headquartered in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and we specialize in high-performance hydraulic and electromechanical components. I also have the honor of serving on the board of directors for AEM, and I am the chairperson of the group's Infrastructure Vision 2050 initiative. I left Milwaukee this morning and it was pounding snow, so it's great to be here in sunny Nashville. And I love Nashville. My sister went to school here, and it's a great city, but I've got to tell you, I took a picture of that derailed train out front, and I'm going to send it to the RNC, because I don't know how many people are from Nashville, but Milwaukee and Nashville are the two finalists for the big convention this summer. So not only is it a great backdrop for a discussion on infrastructure and workforce, but hopefully a plug for Milwaukee. So Infrastructure 2050 is a policy-oriented thought leadership initiative focused on crafting and supporting the implementation of a long-term national vision for U.S. infrastructure. Since 2014, Infrastructure Vision has helped develop innovative, transformative solutions for our country's infrastructure needs. That includes partnering with institutions such as Northwestern University, Cornell, Iowa State University, to support an optimistic vision for how to build a modern, sustainable, and equitable infrastructure system for all Americans. Most recently, we partnered with the Brookings Institution to support their April 2021 report called Rebuilding with a Purpose, an affirmative vision for 21st century American infrastructure. The purpose of this groundbreaking report was to recommend shared priorities for a forward-looking national vision, justify them with rigorous research, and use those priorities to craft high-level strategies that would inform policy change. We're very proud of our partnership with Brookings and our part in making this report a reality, and the fact that over 30 of the policy recommendations in the report were part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill that was signed into law late last year. As our elected officials turn their focus to the implementation of the infrastructure bill, this report will also serve as an important roadmap for a transparent and efficient process, we hope. That brings us to Nashville. You may have heard of the World of Asphalt, which just wrapped up today at Music City Center. AEM brought together manufacturers, service providers, and the aggregate, asphalt, and pavement maintenance sectors to showcase their latest products and technologies. We thought of no better way to cap off this trade show focused on infrastructure construction than to have a conversation with the people about the people needed to help rebuild our nation's roads, bridges, rails, locks, dams, broadband, power lines, and ports. Today's event will feature a two-part discussion. The first panel will explore the demand for current and future infrastructure workers, including the challenges and opportunities in hiring, training, and retention. The second panel will delve into how state and regional actors can expand the reach of infrastructure careers, expanding crucial pathways to recruiting and training the next generation of workers. At the end of the second panel, we invite you all to join us for a reception and discussion here in this beautiful space. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Joe Kane and invite our panelists to come up. Joe is a fellow at the Brookings Institute's Metropolitan Policy Program, thank you, and the author of the Rebuild with Purpose report, and he's going to moderate the first panel. So please come on up and join us. Yeah, give him a hand.
This on? Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Austin. That's perfect. And thanks to everyone for being here today. Obviously, couldn't have timed it any better with the sun coming right through. Gonna have all the solutions coming here in a few minutes. So I want to thank the Association of Equipment and Manufacturers, the Nashville Chamber, for helping us organize this event. Again, my name is Joe Kane. I'm a fellow at the Brookings Institution's Metropolitan Policy Program, so based in Washington, focused on infrastructure issues. Is obviously a very timely moment right now, federally and nationally around these issues, but not losing sight of the state and local angle on this as well, which is why we're in a place like Nashville, where I think there's a lot of challenges around these issues, but a lot of opportunities too. So obviously you're all here to talk about infrastructure, so I don't feel like I have to give too much of a preface of what we're even talking about, but transportation, water, energy, broadband, a whole gamut of built environment issues that we know are very important for our environment, for our economy, for people and places, right? I think it's often very easy to just focus on the physical stuff, the shiny new object, and not think of who is it serving, how is it serving them, is it equitable, is it sustainable, is it future looking? And so that really was an impetus for the report that Austin just described that we came out with last spring, and I think couldn't have timed it any better leading into this conversation this year with the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or EJA, as I like to abbreviate it, that we really do need a future affirmative vision. That yes, there are serious challenges all around the country in terms of infrastructure that's quite frankly aging. It's increasingly creating barriers to opportunity for a lot of people. But there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of opportunity for experimentation, innovation, and we highlight a lot of those issues in the report, which I highly recommend you all read. You can Google it. Just Brookings Future Infrastructure Vision is probably one of the first hits right there. But one of the big forces that we talk about in terms of looking forward is workforce, right? That yes, the importance of technology, environment, funding, and finance, these are all crucial issues that we have to think about and talk about, but workers, who is actually going to construct all of these assets? Who's going to operate and maintain them, right? And that's often a part of the equation that's overlooked in Washington and really across the country, depending on who you talk to. And so today's event really intends to shed more light on that, right? Try to get a different perspective from the demand side, which this panel will focus on, of where is the demand for these workers? Who are the workers that we need? What are the skills they need? Are there enough of them? And I think we'll probably find that there probably aren't. So what are some of the solutions around that? And the second panel, I think we'll get also closer to some of the supply issues of how are we actually training and preparing the next generation of workers to take on these opportunities. So I'm really excited for the conversation. I'll just end on this to say, from my standpoint, a big part of this in terms of the challenges and opportunities are visibility and flexibility, right? That there needs to be greater awareness that, hey, these opportunities exist, right? And guess what? There are, according to our research, there are more than 17 million infrastructure workers across the country. That's 10% of the workforce. And you may not think that because a lot of these workers are sort of out of sight, out of mind when you think of those in the water sector or in manufacturing or in the energy sector, as we'll talk about. But they're crucial for essential services and so many other things that we can take for granted. And that these jobs can pay competitive wages, they can have lower formal educational barriers to entry, they can develop in-demand skills that can be transferable to other careers. And most importantly, I'll say this, before even the pandemic happened, there were challenges even finding enough talent then, particularly given the replacement needs in this sector of what I would call a silver tsunami, where there's a lot of retirements projected to happen. So with that, I'm really excited for today's panel. And so I'll just give a quick introduction before kicking it off. But to my immediate left, we have Diana Alicorn, who's the director of the Nashville Department of Transportation and Multimodal Infrastructure. Diana brings, she's only been in this role, I think, for a few months, but she has over 30 years of experience in this industry. Recently came from Tucson, I believe, and also had a stop in Fort Lauderdale and probably elsewhere that I'm missing. But should very much reflect, I think, some of the public sector perspectives on this, particularly from the employer standpoint. So thanks, Diana, for being here. To Diana's left, we have Tim Averkamp. Is that right? There you go. Who is the group president for Material Solutions and Construction Machinery Solutions at Aztec Industries. Tim has over 27 years of experience in heavy equipment manufacturing. Before his current role was at Deere for many years. So like Diana, offers a tremendous amount of experience to talk to some of these issues, particularly in the private sector. So Tim, thanks for being here. And then last but not least, we have Scott Spence, who is the president and CEO of Duck River Electric Membership Corporation. Scott, is part of an electric co-op serving more than 2,500 square miles in Middle Tennessee, has a passion for workforce and economic development, and has been named, if I'm not mistaken, to the Tennessee Valley Workforce Cabinet. Is that right? Yep, which is an inaugural effort here to highlight some of these issues and others. So Scott, thanks for being here too. So I'll just get right into it, and any of you should feel free to jump in first. But as we think of the range of positions, right, that need to be filled here, we hear a lot about construction jobs, right? That there's this influx potentially of federal funding, that there's going to be a lot of roads and bridges, usually as you hear it in the media. But But we know there's a lot of long-term positions, right, in the skilled trades, in operation and maintenance, and across many different sectors too. So I'm curious, can you just spend a couple minutes describing, what positions are you finding hard to fill, and what types of workers, or who are you looking for? What's keeping you up at night, maybe around some of these issues? So I'll just leave it open if anyone wants to hop in. Scott?
I'll kick us off. So a couple of years ago, there was a survey of 800 CEOs, and the number one thought, number one concern on their minds was workforce development, recruiting, and retaining. That was a couple of years ago, and since the pandemic, I'm sure all of you can attest, it hasn't gotten any easier. And so that's kind of where I'm starting this process, this thought process from. In our particular industry, in the utility industry, about 20 to 25% of all utility employees will be eligible for retirement in the next 5 years. So not only was it tough before the pandemic, we're also looking at this wave of potential retirements going, well, how do we bridge that gap? How do we get ready for that? And so we're looking at all sorts of ways internally in our company and in the utility space for cross-training, creative recruiting wherever possible. We're specifically looking for line workers. Utilities are always looking for electric line workers. It's a very good field to be in, but it takes 5 years to learn the skills necessary. So there's a lot of benefits to that type of work, but it's very difficult to recruit from day one. So this is something we have to have a long lead time on. For professional development, we are looking for engineering, IT, and accounting on a regular basis, and that's getting more difficult in this mobile environment we're competing with remote workers from across the industries in different types of industries. So it's different for us in that we'll have to be more creative in the future than have been in the past. It's going to require more innovative solutions, innovative approaches, and basically just trying harder than we have in the past to recruit and to retain. So I'm sure that's in common with a lot of industries that are represented here today, and that's kind of where we're coming from in the utility space.
Yeah, I imagine we'll hear more about the moving target here that we're already behind. And how do we kind of get ahead of the 8 ball is not going to be easy. Diana or Tim, did you want to pop in?
Well, I'll just, sorry, excuse me. Why is it so loud for me and it wasn't for him? I think we're struggling with many similarities. I'd really appreciate it if y'all gentlemen would stop recruiting and hiring my folks to start with. But I think that the area on the professional side we're really struggling with engineers. And engineers in all the different fields, so from civil to structural to electrical, we're just having a really tough time competing in the workforce for those individuals, and frontline workers as well is really difficult. And on our side, our frontline workers are really the ones that are out there doing the maintenance and the care from the public sector side of the house, and we're having a difficult time recruiting them. And I will share with you today, actually, just before I came over here, I was at a retirement party for one of my employees after 42 years of celebration. So alone in my workforce, which is over 300 employees, I actually have 32% of my employees that are actually eligible for retirement today. So if they came in on Monday and said, Diane, I'm retiring, I'm really in trouble, considering I'm already about 80 people vacant today. So we are definitely exploring some ways and looking at creative practices to attract. We are working really close with trying to set up a funnel with our local university. We have some great talent right here in Nashville with Tennessee State University, with Fisk, with Trevecca, and we are looking at how we can actually funnel some of those folks and give them a pipeline through internship program and to actually, so again, taking that time to build in that skill set so that they can actually move forward. And I know that just in transportation, water's having a similar, our water department's having the similar struggles as well. So we're trying to find those creative ways to attract those professional as well as the front line. Salary, I think, is another big challenge for us, and that's where I'm struggling right now. I cannot compete with the private sector whatsoever with that. I can compete very well with you, probably even beat you on the benefit side, but I cannot on the salary side. And right now we're finding, especially the younger generation, are more focused on pay compensation up front versus long term. So that's a little bit of a competition that I'm having right now. So yes, please leave my folks alone. I'm teasing. Thank you.
I feel like
Scott, right?
Yeah, I feel like, Scott, didn't you have a retirement? I mean, 2 people in your office also today, right?
Yeah, so ironically, I came from 2 retirement celebrations today.
Oh no, see, he even beat me there.
Well, but wait, mine were only 40 and 41 years with our company, so 42, you beat us there. But it is ironic that this is 2 engineers today, and so we're looking for the same skill sets. It's incredible.
Not planned, by the way, for this
Absolutely.
event. No, yeah. Tim.
Yeah, I mean, so in our case, no surprise, similar but a little bit different. So I'll just frame a little bit about who Aztec is. So Aztec's a Chattanooga-based company. We were incorporated in 1972, so this is the 50th anniversary year for us. We employ about 4,000 employees worldwide, and we have about 17 different manufacturing locations across the U.S., Canada, South Africa, Brazil, and Northern Ireland. And we're kind of in the heart of infrastructure, so we actually design, engineer, manufacture, construct, and service equipment that's used in infrastructure. So we talk about the rock to road spectrum for our products. So in the quarry, we have all kinds of crushing equipment, screening, washing, conveyance equipment. We produce the asphalt plants and concrete plants that take the raw material inputs and the binders that create the asphalt and the concrete for curb and gutters and foundations and for the roads that we're talking about. And then on the other end, we have equipment that helps clear site, right-of-way development, site development for chippers and grinders, recycling, environmental, and then lots of road construction. So soil stabilizing, milling machines, asphalt pavers. So we kind of cover the whole spectrum. So you can imagine with our types of equipment, we are looking for skilled labor, right? That's a big thing for us. And I think we've been pretty successful overall. I think if you think about Tennessee in itself, being headquartered in Tennessee, we have 3 major manufacturing locations in Chattanooga. Tennessee makes up a large workforce for us. But skilled labor positions that we are challenged with, of course, are fitters and welders, machinists, so people that take the raw materials and shape it into what we're looking for, maintenance technicians. Think about service technicians that actually work on our equipment in the field. And then, of course, engineering, right? Design engineering, manufacturing engineering. We're focused on continuous improvement. So manufacturing engineers look at the process, work with our employees, and continuous improvement to drive that. And if I take it to our customers, so we talked about World of Asphalt, NSSGA this week. We got a chance to participate in the exhibit and talk to lots of customers and dealers. They're dealing with the same thing, right? So they can't get enough people to operate the equipment. And the skills to operate equipment's a little different than it was in the past. They can't get truck drivers. There's a lot of people that have trucks that are sitting idle right now because they don't have people to drive the trucks to move the finished goods or to move the materials that they have. So, of course, they're dealing with some of the same challenges that we have as well.
Yeah, and so I'll build right off that to get to the sort of the second question on skills, right? And what I think is interesting just from your initial sort of statements is across many different sectors, both the public and private sector, but also in transportation and energy and manufacturing, there are significant shortages of workers across many different types of occupations, whether they're engineers, technicians, et cetera. But we know a challenge that often is in infrastructure and other sectors of the economy at the moment is there just aren't enough skilled workers, right? Or workers with the right skills, I should say, or the relevant training that you need right now. Maybe, said Scott, right? It's going to take 5 years to get someone ready. So, I mean, how is that affecting your work? Your ability to get the work done, and how do you see that evolving here over the next few years? To the extent that the nature of work is changing. Certainly, the role of new technologies that we're kind of playing catch up on our current moment, and yet that moment continues to evolve moving forward. So I'm curious, just how is it affecting your current work now, and how do you see it affecting your work in the next few years, this skills sort of dimension?
You want to go first?
I'll take a shot at it.
Just a softball question.
Yeah. So a lot of the things that utilities have been able to do in the past have worked, but now that we face the current conditions, the pandemic recovery, inflation, and things like that, they're not necessarily successful anymore. We've been able to rely on other utility workers retiring after 20 years on the job and still having 5 or 10 years left and coming to kind of fill in with senior level positions. We've been able to absorb some employees, some contractors that want to work for the local utility. So a lot of those things have worked in the past and they're not working now. Just because of the numbers. So it's definitely slowed down our responsiveness to build and to grow. And in Middle Tennessee, we are growing a tremendous amount. We have a lot of new construction lined up, and so we're always looking for, if we can't fill it with our staff, can we hire contractors on a temporary basis and look for long-term partnerships? Generally speaking, if I had a great answer, I would love to share it with all of you. The reality is we're doing a lot of creative things, creative partnerships with contractors, with other vendors, piecing out part of the work and doing some things from that perspective. We're also looking at modifying our hiring and our staffing as far as availability, hours, and other things of that nature. So basically, almost everything is on the table, and we haven't found one thing that has really made a huge dent. We've found several things. We've added a line crew on, and that's something we don't do every day in our industry, just adding more crews on. So I think we're doing a lot of little things. I don't think any one particular thing has been what I would call a silver bullet.
So just to add to that, some of the things that we're doing on the public sector side, you know, I think I mentioned I'm 80 short today. So we are actually are looking at creating an opportunity. So on the professional side, an opportunity, a benefit to work from home. That's something we all did in the pandemic, but I will tell you, Metro Nashville pretty much has brought most of their folks back into the workplace. I moved from Tucson out here 2 months ago, and I will tell you, up until the day I left Tucson, I was working from home as a director in transportation as well for the city of Tucson. Which is very similar to Davidson County, just from the demographic side of the house. Coming here, everybody's back to work, but that's something I heard very clearly when I came in is, you know, it'd still be much better for me if I could work from home. I could then have a work-life balance. And so how can we implement some type of opportunity that would continue to attract people with the opportunity to work from home? So that benefit. And that needs to be structured with performance measures and responsibilities and accountability, and so we're working on that. On the front end side of the house, where we're really challenged right now with 80 vacancies, a lot of our jobs require someone to have a CDL. So we are currently partnering up right now with the college, the junior college, to work with us with a training program that will be a 6-week training program that will include a mentor and have on-the-job training that at the end of it, they'll be able to actually test for a CDL. And then that way we can bring them in the door, they can start earning a paycheck, and then we're making the investment in them. They'll get the CDL, and then we'll be able to put them out full force in the workforce. So we've had to get a little bit creative in how we kind of are moving things along, doing them differently than what has been the standard practice, but we're finding a little bit of success in this, just not that much. Again, I think my biggest challenge still is the salary. I just am really having trouble even taking a look at us because I cannot even begin to compete with the private sector side of the house. So that's a conversation I'm having at the more senior level than me.
Great. Tim?
Yeah, and similar commentary for us too. I think in the past, you know, hiring was pretty easy, and so you think about our onboarding process. It's a lot different. You can't just put somebody to work right now. So we have a mentorship program and a little bit longer training period than you otherwise would like to, right? So, and I think as a company, we're trying to be more flexible, and maybe we always built this at this factory, but we need to be more flexible, and maybe we're going to build this in a different facility that has the capability or has the resources to do it. So it's driving us to be a little bit more flexible. Also driving us to be more efficient. Talk about continuous improvement. You know, if we can reduce the waste that we have, it's going to help us, right? You think about automation, you know, looking at more robotic welding, paint automation, those type of things. But that creates a whole nother thing, which we'll probably talk about is, you know, the skill sets that are required to help maintain and program and all those type of things at the same time. So yeah, just a lot of things. And of course, we're very involved with the trade associations. We're a big supporter, participate in those because we're all kind of fighting for the same thing. And it's really important for our industry overall.
One thing I'd like to add just real quick to this that both of y'all made me think about it was some of us, we have reached out to the private sector to help us with some of these vacancies and getting jobs done. So they've been a great partner and we appreciate that. The other part has been messaging. And we're trying to do a much better job in messaging to our community about expectations. So where maybe perhaps we would usually have in the past been able to get to it in 2 days or 3 days that may take us 5 days to 7 days because of the workforce. That's a communication, a messaging initiative. And so we're putting that out there and letting folks know. And I think that that's really important is kind of going ahead and make sure you're gauging that community expectation on delivery.
Maybe if I could just add one more comment. I think about being deliberate too. I think we've gotten sharper in terms of our development of a career path. So, you know, when you came in as an assembler, you were an assembler. The past you came in as a welder. So we want defined, you know, stratification, right? Welder 1, welder 2, welder 3. What's the training requirements? How do you show that you've got the experience and qualified to go that next level? Because it's not just you're going to come today and do what you do today tomorrow. We want to make sure that we continue to grow those employees and have a chance, right?
Very good point.
That's terrific, and I can't believe the time's already passing so quickly. I'm going to ask one more question, do sort of a lightning round here, before we turn it to the audience for Q&A. And I think you're kind of already getting on the edges of where the second panel is going to start on kind of, well, all right, well, we know there's a demand. How do we sort of answer that demand? Where are these workers going to come from? Who are they? And as we think of, sort of, as Austin was saying to kick off the event, sort of a vision for 2050, right? That we're not just solving this for 2022, but we're ideally coming up with solutions for the next few decades, right? In an affirmative, forward-looking way. And we know that, as you were just describing, there are serious challenges around not just hiring and training, but also retention. And so, with this sort of future outlook in mind, right, of yes, the sky is kind of falling right now, and that's enough to take care of, let alone where you're going to be in 5 or 10 years. But, and just a sort of a minute or less each, I'm just curious, where would you like to see there being improvements, right? Where do you see there being room for, solving some of these issues? What do you hope to see maybe covered in the second panel, right, on some of the hiring, training, and retention needs? Is it, often, right, in Washington, right, we just need more money, right? Like, just give us more funding and that can kind of be the rising tide that lifts all boats. But I know from the employer standpoint, right, you all have a huge responsibility to play in on-the-job training, work-based learning, providing prospective workers and current workers those opportunities to continue to grow their careers. So I'm just curious what you're thinking in terms of what would be a solution as you think of these challenges in the next few years.
So yes, we would never turn down more money, but one of the things that I would say we're trying to be creative about is fitting our organization to our workforce, our existing workforce. As we look at who our high performers are and the next generation, we're trying to adapt our organizational structure to make sure there are opportunities. And it's changed our hiring process as well, because we're actually looking at candidates for cultural fits and thinking not only the position they're applying for, but can we work with this individual for 5, 10, 20 years if it works out that way in other roles? And so we're looking at cultural fit, and if that's really strong, we're trying to be flexible on what type of role we could get them in on. So we're adapting the organization to the workforce as much as possible, and we intend to be more flexible in the future in that regard.
And I have to agree with that. I'm coming in and I'm actually trying to structure something very similar where it's about growing them internally, but not just within my department. So I have an entire city that I can think about, and there's opportunities across the board. So if you have someone that comes along that has I say passion. If you have the passion to be a community and public servant, we want to keep that passion. So whether it's within my department, another department, we want to make sure we're developing those skill sets, and that's really important. For the frontline workers, I think one of the things that we're getting creative real quick about is how can we start having the conversation with those seniors in high school? The ones that aren't really interested in going to college, but really want to have a good career path opportunity and have a top opportunity to grow both professionally and personally. And there are some great opportunities within our government agency, again, not within my own department, but within Metro Nashville. So how is it we can get in and work with our local school system for those students and bringing them in and start setting up a nice professional growth opportunity for them?
Yeah, so I like to build off of that. So what's going through my mind again is the stigma, the stigma about working in a factory, what that's like. Growing up, at one point in time, my dad worked in a meat processing plant. My mom worked in a factory, cutting cushions for furniture. And I think the factories that they worked in at that time are much different than they are today, right? The factories are safe. We have engineered a lot of things to make the work a lot easier. The hard skills, after the hard skills, it's the soft skills too, right? Being able to communicate, be a good teammate, and working with each other. And it's not just the students, it's actually, in my past, if we can get the parents in and the teachers in to see what the environments are really like, it's completely different, right? It's not just about the students, because you want the parents to see it's a different environment than what it used to. It's a safe environment. I'm sure, Austin, you could attest to that too with your factories. It's very much different than it was 25 years ago, right?
Yeah, that's terrific, and I think Karen signaled to me that we might have a little more time, which is great. So maybe one more question. I'll be greedy. So, you're kind of pointing to some solutions, right? Almost some, forward-looking. I don't say like wish lists, but like, hey, the nature of work is changing in good ways, right? That needs to be appealing to more people, or it should be. The message needs to get out there. We are at this moment now where there is going to be an influx of federal resources around infrastructure broadly. There's still a lot of blanks to fill in on that, of how the federal government is going to coordinate with state and local government. I'm sure Diana has her own thoughts on this, but irrespective of kind of all the individual sort of programs within the law and everything, but right, there's going to be more money coming from the federal government towards infrastructure, and ideally the ways in which projects and activities get done that connects to workers, right? And so what are some of your hopes, right, given this infusion of resources? What do you hope to see as a result of this moment, right, that's going to set us up hopefully for continued and durable success ongoing, that we're reaching more and different types of people, that we're growing that talent pool, that we're creating that talent pipeline? What are you hoping to see as a result of some of this new federal funding?
All right, I'm going to take that one. My first hope is that the federal government will remove the NEPA requirement so we can get more done. Because that requirement is such, so with this new money coming down, okay, so it's your environmental review that you have to do for your project. And so it looks at everything. It looks at the environment. It looks at the environmental justice, you name it. It looks at all of that stuff that is the project's going to impact. And you have to do a full analysis and study and turn it in to show that you're not going to have an impact. And if you're going to have an impact, what you're going to do to mitigate that. And I don't want to be disrespectful because it is a very important piece of it. But the process that you have to go through, the time it takes to review, can actually lengthen a project by a year. And so where you might want to have a project ready to go and you want to come out of the bucket and you want to get to work, you might be sitting back and waiting 2 years to get to that point where you can pull the trigger and go. The other thing is there is this great money out there, but a lot of local governments aren't ready for the money. They have the project, like it's an idea, it's on paper, but they haven't even started the planning process. They haven't gone through the community engagement process. They haven't done the NEPA process. And you have to do all of that, and then you have to have it designed. So a lot of this money that's coming down through the federal government right now is coming down for projects that we call shovel ready, which they have to be pretty much at 60% engineering design, everything else done. You can push the pencil real quick to get to 100% and put it out to bid and go spend the money. And so as wonderful as it is, a lot of government are behind the 8 ball. And that's because there just isn't enough money out there to get you to that point. So I ask the federal government to eliminate the NEPA process, but I really do not want that. But I would like for them to find a way to shorten it or to have a different way of evaluating it. But I would like to see some of the money come down that would allow for the planning, the NEPA, and the engineering design to get you to shovel ready. And there never seems to be those dollars available. That always has to come from the local side. And, I run through the general fund. So money coming to me means it's coming out of police, fire, and your toilet getting flushed. That's very hard to compete with.
Yep. Yeah, and I know, I was like, I know Diana's going to have an opinion on this.
I can go on and on.
And I know, Tim and Scott might have a slightly different perspective just because you are coming from the private sector, and a lot of the eligible entities actually they're going to get this funding are kind of like Diana, right? At Nashville, Department of Transportation. But do you have any thoughts, either of you, on any of this? Or
Yeah, I think for us, we're kind of the lag, right? So after those projects get identified and an engineer, that's where we're coming to play, and we'll try to help define the solution, but probably not direct benefit from the funding until we get work from our customers, right, to help them design that.
So I'll take it in a little bit different direction. It may not be as much of an issue in Nashville, but in parts of rural Tennessee, we'll talk about the digital divide, the access to broadband. And if there's one thing we've learned in the last couple of years, people can work from home, people can go to school from home, telemedicine. So the need for more broadband in more parts of Tennessee is greater than ever, especially with the influx of people moving here from the West. It's putting a strain on our system and our resources. So one thing we're very committed to doing is help solving part of that digital divide. And part of this money is definitely going to help get connected to underserved or not served rural communities. And that's very important to us as an opportunity. We view this as it's a very stressful time, but it's an opportunity because if we can get that going, it provides resources and potentially more workforce. So we're kind of looking at the silver lining from that perspective.
I'm glad you brought that up, that there's an urban and a rural dimension to all of this. I wanted to open it up to any questions in the room in the few minutes that we had before until the next panel has to come up. anything on the topics we discussed, anything we didn't discuss. Anyone, I guess you can just stand up, yeah.
Have you considered that waiting till students are in 12th grade is too late? Because, their minds are pretty much made up. So like back it up 3 years, start with 8th and 9th graders, 8th graders.
We're actually going to start at third grade. So we actually have been having conversation about what is that right age to start the conversation. And we've been having it with folks out there that have actually, the professionals. So I'm not a professional in that experience. And they have come back and said, Dinah, we need to start this conversation in the third grade. I'm like, great, so how do we do it? So it goes back to that, when your parents used, or your mom or dad or whoever it was, used to come and do career day. We've sort of gotten away from a career day. So we're going to have conversations with Metro Nashville school system about coming back in and doing a career day in third grade. And then that would start that conversation. And then you're absolutely correct. They actually recommend we come back in the 7th grade, and then we come back at the 9th grade. And then that just kind of starts giving a little bit more of where repeat, I guess is how they used it. It's good for them to see the repeat. And of course, if we go to the 7th and the 9th grades now, it's not going to be a repeat. But if we start with the 3rd grade next year, then we hit them at 7 and 9, they're going to hear that there's this other opportunity for them. So yes, I agree with you. But this is a new program that we're just going to be kicking off and trying right now.
But each one of your industries, it's
Yeah.
not just the student that doesn't want to go to college, but the student that wants to go to college.
Right.
And I mean, it would seem to me, having started my first job in a factory out of college, that there was a huge divide back then. You were either on the management side or the non-management side. And
when I was in Florida, the Florida Department of Transportation would hold a career day, and they would do it for all of high school. And it would be a 3-day, and we'd be in a rodeo ground. And they would literally, from morning to afternoon, bring students in. And they had a bunch of different professional groups that would come in and participate. And so you had your planners, you had your engineers, you had the equipment operators, you had every industry you could think of about building a road. And they had surveyors, everybody in there. So it was really, because this was the Florida Department of Transportation. So it was anyone who would touch the road would come in, including legal. And that was starting, and they'd have 9th through 12th just to get the exposure. And it was amazing how many, had the pleasure of doing that for 3 years. And I would say in Broward County, I must have had at least 4,000 kids cross we did planning. That's what our group did. And that would come through and plan roads and talk through that. And that was just super fun. And it was great to see the light bulb go on when it went on.
Maybe I'll just add maybe 2 points. First thought is, we have good examples of where that's worked really well. It reminded me last summer, I was visiting one of our factories in Eugene, Oregon. I talked to this young man. He's probably 23 years old. I think he started with a work co-op program. He was a sophomore in high school. And he was so proud. He was telling me by the age of 20, he owns a house. None of his friends own a house, right? So, I mean, stories like that, they're few and far between, right? We got to get that out there. Yeah. The other thought that came to mind, we did this World of Asphalt exhibit this week, and today I was talking to a customer, and I was just stopped in my tracks. I looked up, and there's a 5-year-old kid on top of a paver moving the controls and the seats. I went over and talked to the dad. He's a small paver in the Tennessee area. He just said he loves it, tried to get his kid interested in it. It kind of just struck me that, man, I wish there was more of that was happening right now. It's maybe stopping my tracks. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, not ad hoc, but intentional, right? And showing that what I've often heard is it's not just a career that people just fall into, but it's a career of choice, right? It's something that people want to be involved in. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, in the back.
So for groups or organizations that do have, I guess, talent pipeline solutions, or whether it be education or training to assist in building a pipeline, who is like the correct or most appropriate person to reach out to? Because sometimes you'll have like a solution and not be able to get to the person that's like, I guess, very passionate about or really invested in, like, okay, let's see how we can really figure this out. So I know all of you are C-level, so I'm not sure exactly Is it C-level? Is it HR? Is it corporate training? Like, who would be the most appropriate contact?
I would say yes. So in our case, we are looking, we actually start in elementary school with our partnership with local schools, middle school, high school. We have programs. We're in schools all the time. We are reaching out. We do a lot of creative things. In our case, and I speak for a lot of utilities in this, the answer is yes. If it's somebody in HR, somebody at your local office, there's always a way to connect potential solutions like that. Historically, maybe utilities weren't quite as responsive. We didn't think that way. That is changing in the past 2 years. We are actually looking and being more intentional about that process. So in our case, in the utility space, and I feel like I speak for a lot of others, we're trying to be a little bit more responsive as far as looking for talent solutions, possibilities. Things work different now than they did a couple years ago, and I cannot fathom how different that will be 2 or 3 years from now even.
Yeah, I think Scott's dead on. It's not an HR issue, right? It's a business issue. It's a company issue. So I think any of my team or myself would be happy to engage in that conversation.
That's a third yes.
I'll end on total agreement. Take that opportunity. So I learned, hopefully you did too, a lot from this conversation. I know we could keep going here for probably quite a while. This is obviously a huge topic just to cover in even just 2 panels. And I'm just very grateful for Tim, Scott, and Diana for you sharing your insights. I think there's a lot to build on the research that our team did that Austin was citing at the beginning. I think it kind of validates a lot of what, statistically and otherwise that we've found that there are some big gaps to fill here. And there has to be some intentionality from the standpoint of employers, but also I think we'll hear in a few minutes here, some other actors, including educational institutions, community organizations, and other intermediaries to be involved in this as well, to really create that talent pipeline. So thanks again for being here, and thanks everyone for the questions. Appreciate it.
Great. I'll add my thanks. That was a fabulous panel, Joe. Thank you for doing a terrific job of moderating. And I'm going to make a couple more comments, but I'll ask the second panel to just come on up and take your seat while I do that. Do you all remember like 5 years ago when a bunch of fancy people, not Joe, but people like Joe at like big think tanks in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere were talking about how technology was going to disrupt the future of work so much that there just wasn't going to be enough work to go around. I mean, we had a presidential campaign candidate in 2020 that his whole campaign was based on the notion of we need to provide universal income because there's not going to be enough work out there to keep our citizens engaged. I mean, if I had to synthesize the message of that first panel, it's that we have so much demand for work for people with the right skills, right? Not skilled or unskilled, but people with the right skills, that we can't do our jobs as infrastructure builders, as private companies. Wage inflation is out of control. We're competing with each other for workers. It's not working. Something's got to give. Now, this next panel is going to talk about one of the major solutions, which is we need to have a step change in how we think about preparing people to have those right skills to enter the workforce. Extemporaneizing a bit, we also need to be thinking about how we just increase the workforce. And I look at cities like Milwaukee and Nashville, and we've got big slugs of our population that because our K through 12 system is so broken that we're either not graduating kids out of high school or we're graduating them out of high school without the basic skills that they need to even enter the sort of professional development programs and community colleges that we're going to talk about in this next panel. So I think that has to be part of our dialogue too. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Coleman, who's the Chief Talent Development Officer at the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, and we're going to talk about how do we make that step change in preparing our workforce to take on these jobs.
Thank you. So I know this is the moment you all have been waiting for, the solutions part, right? So we've got all the answers here, right? Yeah. So you all know that in order to create workforce solutions, it is a collaborative effort, and we have here with us representatives from the state, from educational providers, and from an employer. And you're going to see how each of these entities not only work within their own walls, but work together to ensure that we have the talent that we need to fill the jobs. But we know that we're in a really unique time. We know that we don't have enough people So that's problem number one. And then we need the skilled talent to fill the job. So I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have. Joe mentioned visibility and flexibility being important. And one of the themes that you will hear about and that hopefully you will read about in the Brookings report is that we've got to tap into underrepresented populations who may not have even thought about or known that infrastructure jobs existed. Part of that goes back to the previous panel and how do we create opportunities for kids at a younger age to just know, to be exposed and have awareness of job and career paths early on so that they can get excited about them. But with that, very excited to be with you all. The Chamber is deep into this work. We are one of these workforce partners. We have a whole team working on talent solutions, and a lot of what was discussed earlier really resonates with us. So with that, I'm going to introduce our panel and then we'll jump right in. So on the far end there, we have Denise Thomas, who is the Deputy Commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development. And she has been with the department since 2007, but in her current role since 2018. And she also is involved in a number of efforts on the national level, just a couple that I will mention here. So she's a member of the National Employment and Training Committee and Veterans, serves on the National Apprenticeship Work Group, and also serves as the State Workforce Liaison for the National Governors Association, among many other things. She is a busy woman. We also have Dr. Michael Torrance, who is the president of Motlow State Community College. He has been the president since 2018, but has been in higher ed for 25 years, has a lot of experience working in higher ed and really connecting with students and helping to create that transition when students are thinking about what their career path is and should be, and helping to navigate that process for them. One of my favorite things that I read in his bio, among many other accolades, is that he recently earned a welding certificate through Motlow's Automation and Robotics Training Center to really serve as a model. So we may or may not talk about that, but that was really intriguing to me. And then he also, I just want to mention that he's a Tennessee Board of Regents Maxine Smith Fellow and is one of only 2 fellows who's been appointed to a community college president role within the TBR system. And again, I'm not going to go through the whole list of accolades, but just to give you an idea of some of the skill sets and experience up here on our panel. And then finally, we have Tracy Wells, who is here representing an employer, representing FedEx Ground. And Tracy has been in her current role for, 10 years of diversity and inclusion and communications experience through multiple FedEx operations, and then in her current role since 2020 as the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Engagement at FedEx Ground. So a lot of experience from that employer level, really trying to figure out how to engage workers, how to train them up, and again, how to really tap into underrepresented populations and make sure they have that sense of belonging and that career pathway within the company. So with that, we are going to jump right into our first question. And really want to understand from that worker standpoint, what hurdles workers are facing as they move into infrastructure jobs. So if you all could kind of speak to, we'll start kind of high level from the state standpoint, then provider, and then employer standpoint. What are some of the barriers that you're seeing, Denise?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, we still see some of the traditional barriers around childcare, transportation, access. It's not that the jobs aren't there, but I think we take for granted one's ability to navigate. How do I access and take part in it? How do I gain the skills to do it? Am I qualified? Does anything transfer to these types of jobs? I think we still see that with a lot of workers. And so the emphasis is on career guidance and exploration to help one be able to not just access it, but be able to obtain the information to be able to take part in it. I know for me, I'm not the most savvy when it comes to trying to get around the voice prompt when I want to talk to a customer service person. I'm like, gosh, I feel like an idiot. I can't figure out how to get a body. So can you imagine someone who traditionally has not been a part of sort of mainstream, particularly if it's a new career path? How do I even start that process? And so I think we take a lot of that for granted. We talk a lot about first-generation college students, but let's be honest, we're still dealing with a lot of first-generation workers where we have first, second, third generation where they've not seen work. So the models are not there. So there's a lot of obstacles that aren't always obvious on trying to help people gain access to critical infrastructure jobs. So when we talk about clean energy jobs, for example, we may assume there's not interest, but some people are still struggling with how to get clean water. So I think there's some very basic human conditions that oftentimes can be obstructive to a real meaningful career path. And so those are some of the very real organic conversations we have about how do we remove some very basic barriers to kind of have that conversation about let's get you lined up in sort of what I call a survival job so that you can eat, so that you can learn and matriculate, so that you can soar. So that's kind of what we're saying still, Stephanie.
Michael?
So I'll give you acronyms up here because we love acronyms in education. So I'll say SCRUB, seek career ready under development. And the idea of finding young people and those who are in mid-career that are prepared to go to work and looking for additional skills, absolutely. Third grade, because of the literacy rate, obviously understandable. I want to spend time with kids when they're in pre-K. And we can't wait till tomorrow, we need to start today. So scrub, for those of you who are taking notes. Secondly, it's about tools and the ubiquity of tools because of broadband and immaterial of whether or not you live in a rural area or a micro metro or a metro. Having the appropriate tool so that you have access to the content and that you can manipulate the content in real time. And we have the ability to do that today. That allows the skill development that our employers are seeking, as well as appropriate assessment components that I have to deal with faculty who ask the questions. Is this rigorous enough? Is this quality enhanced, et cetera, et cetera. So scrub and tools are very, very important in the work that we're pushing forward today.
Tracy, what about you?
So the key word that I heard is access, providing access to job opportunities. And I'm gonna tell you a little story. So I work at FedEx. And oftentimes when you think about FedEx, oftentimes people think about the roles where people drive the trucks, load and unload the packages, which is what we call our frontline team member population. And then we have roles that are more, I don't like to use the word professional, but roles that are more like marketing, social media, things that really kind of intrigue a younger demographic, right? And so access is important, but awareness is also important. Letting people know that there are jobs within this company that may fulfill their interest. And so what we've done, a couple of things that we've done. One, we've had an opportunity to develop a high school program. And I know there's a lot of talk about getting into the preschool and third grade. But we've developed a high school program where we go into the classrooms and we talk to students kind of like Career Day, but it's more so across the country. Our talent acquisition team members have a program. So you talk to them 1 week about teamwork, why teamwork is important. And then at the end, we talk about FedEx and what teamwork means to FedEx. We might talk about community activation, why that's important. And then we talk about what FedEx does in the community. So students over a 6-week period will have an opportunity to kind of start learning more about FedEx beyond the traditional driver, which is very key because I like my packages being delivered too. Another thing we've done, and I have been in this role as Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or what we call inclusion engagement. And that's, my goal for my department is to take a look at our organization and understand the culture, and then create a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So 1 year into this role, the first month, our goal was to go out and understand what the culture is, not inside of our corporate offices, but go into the field, into our hubs and stations, and understand what that culture looks like. And I personally spent some time overnight loading packages, unloading packages, talking to team members. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? And oftentimes they say, I want to make more money. I want to move up in the company. So my question is, what do you want to do? When you say move up, I don't know. Real talk. There was one guy, I'll never forget him. I said, well, where do you want to work? He says, over there. And I looked over there, honestly, I didn't know what that role was. And I said, well, what do they do? I don't know, it just looks fun. But the key was, I want to make money, I want to do something that's fun, but don't know how that's possible, right? And so from that experience, we developed, and we'll probably talk a little bit more about it, but we developed a program that now we rolled it out, launched it in June, where team members now understand what that means over there. They understand what opportunities are available, and then we provide them with that access through other programs that I'm sure we'll get a chance to talk about. But I agree, access and awareness is important.
That's great, and it reminds me of Scott talking earlier about the culture piece being so important and trying to really fit the organization to the culture of existing employees, retention being a huge part of this puzzle that we're trying to solve. Kind of elaborating, Tracy, on what you just talked about, why do you think employers in general are struggling to bring in younger workers or underrepresented workers, a more diverse workforce? What are some of the barriers you're seeing on the employer side for being able to recruit in?
Everybody needs need employees. Yeah. All of y'all, all of us need employers. And so it's a competition. It's very competitive. Another opportunity is people are not always aware, again, of what opportunities are available. So if they're not aware, they're not applying for the jobs. So we have to be really intentional about not only making sure that our jobs are posted and people apply, you do commercials to invite people, but you have to also create strategic programs for us to ensure that we are inviting a diverse group of individuals. And when I say diverse, I mean beyond age and gender and race. We're also very intentional about talking about diversity of thought, diversity in experience, because those things will really help us develop company processes and programs that really help us drive the bottom line. And you have to start thinking beyond just the normal diversity aspect. And so in doing so, we are intentional about where we go to recruit. We've started some new programs where, I've talked to some of our leaders and they say, I want to have a diverse workforce, but I'm looking at a resume. How do I know if this person is diverse in the traditional sense or not? What you do is you hire the most qualified candidate, and you source your candidates from all types of institutions, organizations, nonprofit organizations, and as long as you're intentional about your applicant pool, you will hire the best candidate, and it's very likely statistically that some of those candidates are going to be diverse in the traditional sense, and also when we talk about experience and thought.
Thank you. Michael and Denise, both of you work with employers as well every day. What are you experiencing in terms of barriers that they might be facing, keeping in mind that we just heard from the first panel that, 25% of infrastructure workers are going to either retire or move into a different role in the next 10 years. So there's a real need. We also heard about some retirement parties happening earlier today, a real need to fill that workforce. What are you all experiencing, and what advice do you have?
So I'll say, particularly as a conversation with employers, one, we touched a lot on culture, which I thought was huge. And thank you for that comment, because we can want it, but we have to organizationally be prepared for what it is that we're seeking. Mentorship inside an organization is huge. The reality is, when we're talking about the traditional sense, and I love, Tracy, that you leverage diversity of thought, because I think it just transcends what someone looks like. But representation really does matter. When you walk into an organization, you see someone that looks like you, have similar interests, you feel this sense of connection. And human beings want to feel like they belong. And so organizationally, it has to be an environment where people feel like not only am I welcomed, but I'm also valued, and there's an opportunity for me to really spread my proverbial wings. And how we do that is by looking at what are some things that just low-hanging fruit that we could tackle. I was talking to an employer who said, I've spent all this money on outreach materials, and I took a look at some of the brochures, and I said, but you have a very homogeneous group in all of your materials. So the perception is that that's not a place for me. It could be totally different, and it was different because it's a super amazing employer. But just those small things to really think about. And then the last thing I would just say very quickly before turning to Dr. Torrance, how many of you had chores growing up? By show of hands. Okay. You know, statistics say kids aren't doing chores. That was our first bit at working. When mom said or dad said, make the bed, you made the bed. And if you didn't make that bed right, mom and dad was your first supervisor. They were like, you're gonna fix this bed and you're gonna do it right now and you're not gonna eat and you're not gonna play until you do it, right? So there was compensation or there was behavior modification, I like to call it, because we gotta be nice, if you didn't do it. And so my point for that is that we see kids who are not often in stable home environments. There's no chores. There's not conversations at the dinner table about what do you want to be, what do you want to see. And so all of those things are really impactful when one starts to start their career journey. So oftentimes as employers, it can't just be a consumer type relationship where you're going to benefit from all this person's skills. It's almost like being a corporate parent sometimes. And I know that sounds really bad, but it's not. That's where mentorship picks up, to have someone help understand why it's important to work with a small group and problem solve. And you take it back home, like when your brother and sister were fighting over the remote. Okay, there was a process in who got the remote and who got to watch their show. So when you're working in a corporate environment or any organization, there's still basic problem solving. And the reality is we can be really good at simulating work-based learning. We can be real good at training people. You learn to work by working. And you learn to do things at home because you had someone overseeing you, providing nurturing and support. Even if there were consequences, it's because, you know, they felt like, well, mom, dad still loves me. And so a lot of that is a basic human need, but as we see that kind of parlay over into organizations, really helping people understand that there's a path for them, not pathways, but a path for them to even begin the pathways. And so anyway, I'll climb down off my soapbox now.
Well, we're looking at the conversation with employers in terms of when we walk into the room, whether it be C-suite or with hiring managers, listening first and reacting instead of responding, and then responding instead of reacting. And that's very difficult for people in higher education because we think we're really, really smart and we already have all the answers. So we have to listen first and then understand that we need to create not just customizable programs, but intentionality, as you said before, around what's going to be the outcome. The future of work, it's not the future of work, it's now. And so the idea of mapping for our students, whether they're pre-K through job, what does this career pathway look like? And along the lines, will I be 18 and I can afford the house if I start at 14 as an apprentice? Will I be 20 and I can afford a larger house but I can sell the other one, and now I'm maybe thinking about having a girlfriend or wife that maybe want to start a family? So when students see where they can get to through not a job but a career lattice, I think that's really important. Yes, it is tied to the dollars and cents, the bottom line, how much can I make? But I think a really, really important point that was made up here today, when you work in the public sector and as a public servant, you have an opportunity to, on the back end, take care of yourself and your family in a way that's different than a 401k, that is larger than in the private and public sectors, right? So that's one of the things I think are really important, mapping it for our students so they can see it. And I do mean not just on a blank sheet of paper that's 2D. Students want to experience things now. If you have grandchildren or children or younger brothers and sisters, everybody's playing video games. If you will look at my socks, I wore them purposefully today, okay? This is the game system that I played on as a kid, and now it permeates my work because play is a very important part of learning. In learning to work, you have to enjoy that. And there's only one way to do that. You have to understand that the skills that you are going to articulate, that you're going to utilize, are going to come from how you play games. How many of you understand the fact that your best friends and the people that you're closest with played games the right way? You need to reflect on that for a second. People work and engage in the same way they play games. If you have someone who got an extra point and they didn't really get an extra point, that's probably not going to be a good person that's going to be handling your money in the business office, right? Or if you have someone who's going to be servant-oriented when they play games, I want to make sure that Johnny or Bobby's okay when I lift them up. These are the types of students that become very good empathetic leaders. And we know that that's a term that we're using right now about what good leadership looks like. So those conversations around the C-suite table as we're building programs for our employers, whether it's from AR, VR, AI programming to distribution centers and financial centers, making sure that our students understand the wherewithal about what that will look like when they get there, so you can spend less time spinning them up when you hire them.
Thank you.
Can I add a little bit to
Absolutely.
that? Because you made mention about experience. Students need experiences, and we as employers need talent. How do we attract, right? And so if I could just throw out an idea, something that we found to be pretty beneficial recently in connecting with some historically Black colleges and universities, but you could do it at any university. But we provided an experience recently for students at about 8 different historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. It was a virtual 3-hour experience. We invited the schools to send a total of 6 students to a virtual experience at FedEx. I work at FedEx Ground. We have different operating companies, and each operating company has a CEO that reports to Fred Smith. Our CEO is so invested in what we're doing, he participated in this event. So they heard from him during the main stage. They heard from some of our senior leaders in the organization to talk about what life is like at FedEx Ground. And let me also say, before we even invited them, we had individual meetings with each university to say, this is what we're planning to do. This is why we're doing it, and we ask that you be intentional about the students that you send, because they're going to be in the environment with senior C-suite and other team members, and we want you to be able to send someone who will be able to really absorb the experience. And when this is over, we're going to come back to you, and we want to know how it went. What went well, what didn't work well, because we want to continue to build that model, but we worked and partnered with universities to do that. They came to the experience, they listened to these leaders, they went in breakout rooms. So if a student was studying finance, then they went to the accounting finance room to understand what work was like at FedEx in the finance department. If you were a communicator, you go to the communications department. Engineers went to engineering breakout room, line hall, in order to understand what the real life is like. And then they got tips and tricks on resume writing and all that good stuff. But the intent for that was to give them exposure, and to also give us exposure to students without committing to it. So when they apply, now I know your name because I saw you in that breakout room, and now I'd like to extend an opportunity for further conversation. So it was a fun little opportunity that we were able to experience. We plan to expand it, but I thought I would just share that as an idea as you also look to try to attract talent.
That's great. That's a great example of really being intentional about recruiting and training and focusing on underrepresented populations as well to make sure that there's that access you were talking about. Are there other examples of things that your organizations are doing to recruit and train up and reach out to underrepresented populations?
Yeah, so from the public workforce system space, helping our folks understand the importance of, we use this adage about meeting people where they are. And I challenge that a bit because I think we meet people where we think they should be. And those are 2 different things. And so we are sending our folks out into communities to serve where they literally physically are. The understanding that we need partners in this work. And oftentimes there's a lot of mistrust in some underrepresented communities. And so where's their fidelity? Typically it's with community-based or nonprofit organizations that are already operating in that space. And so I would implore you as employers to think about non-traditional partners in this work when you're looking at recruiting. Because if you have, a group that's already, on the block across the street, they trust that community partner. And they may be your way in as opposed to us showing up and go, we're the government, we're here to help. And so how do we help that community-based organization build capacity to continue to serve, to offer those opportunities? One of the things that we strongly advocate for is work-based learning and employers opening their doors to do that because it's critical. And on one side of the house, labor represents a regulatory arm. So we were kind of devouring ourselves because the regulatory side was kind of chiding employers like, you can't have a 16-year-old do that. But we were saying, do work-based learning. And so we were a bit sort of off kilter. And so one of the things we came back and said, listen, we should be leading a consulting function to companies to help them understand there are some things that a 15-year-old could do that typically you probably would have got in trouble for. So we've opened up the door to expand work-based learning, and not just the work-based learning component, but allowing kids to be apprentices, and Michael touched on this, while they're in high school. Youth apprenticeships are allowed and they are welcomed. Kids can earn, and that makes a difference. You don't have to wait till they're an adult and be an apprentice. You can get them in an apprenticeship program while they are young. And so by the time they're 19, 20, they're already there. And so starting younger is very important. I'll give you an example of sort of a big employer that's coming on the western part of our state with Ford, and Vicki knows this quite well. Ford won't open their doors for, at least another year and a half, 2 years. But they were here and did a career exploration event in West Tennessee. 3,000 eighth graders. They didn't wait until, their building is not even ready. But they knew that they could not wait to do that career exploration event. So it's never too early to start, but let it not be a one and done, but that there is engagement at the community level to say, we're willing to offer a work-based learning opportunity. We're open to youth apprenticeship. We're open to a shadowing. We're open to mentoring, because oftentimes, again, it's not about being a consumer, but it's about being a partner. And the younger you start partnering with potential workforce, you've already built the trust that's so needed to have an employee that's going to be loyal to you for a very long time.
When we have these conversations that are community-based, whether it be private employers or in the public sphere, we're tying it all back to not only should it, as I said before, be customizable, but it should also be intentional about not where your business is today, as we've heard, but where your business is going and growing. And what that means is the scalable skills, the essential skills that we sometimes call soft skills, or simply being able to communicate and look someone in the eye and have a conversation, tuck your shirt in, pull your pants up, tie your shoes because it's a OSHA hazard, right? That conversation is taking place in kindergarten. It's taking place in middle school. It's taking place in high school. It is taking place again once they get to the community and technical college sectors in the first-year experience program. How do you write a form letter? How do you understand whether or not you need to go to school longer than is necessary? Because I know that everyone in the room wants, including you, you want the employee right now. The employee is prepared skill-wise, but in order to accentuate and push your culture forward, there are some essential skills that are necessary. And that is what we talk about in terms of lifelong learning or commitment to the lifelong growth of the human being. So that's part and parcel as well. Lastly, the utilization of any type of emergent training tools is very, very important. I don't think universities or technical colleges or community colleges are only coming to you for the resource of dollars and cents. We want to know that you'd be okay with experiential learning in a virtual space that accentuates the skill sets that are going to be necessary to be successful and can push forward with minimal cost to your bottom lines at the end of each quarter. So the advent of the use of the tools that are available today, they're available at our institution. I don't want to see you only once a quarter or once a month. I don't want you to recruit my students, because I take ownership of these young men and women. They're in my care. I want you there as often as you want to be, as many times if you want to be, whenever you want to be, appropriately building a relationship, not a rapport with them. If you want someone to have a career with your organization, you don't just show up when you don't have enough people there. Build relationships with the organizations in which you're going to seek and recruit human beings from, and let them know who you are, not only culturally, and we can pay you this much and we're looking for this skill, but we're willing to grow with you, because without you, this company can't grow.
That's great. So talk a little bit about, and you've mentioned a few examples, but how you coordinate across multiple sectors. So, as an educational provider, how do you work with other educational providers, but also we've talked about connections with employers, nonprofits, labor unions, trade associations, et cetera. What are some examples of how you're coordinating and collaborating?
Well, we're really direct. I think you kind of get that. We're really direct. I think it's very important to show up. I think it's very important to talk about exactly what the needs are, and not continue to build out the idea of let's pontificate about what we need to do. But when do you need it? When do you want it? And what is your end of this stick? I think that I'm not unique, and my team is not unique, but we find that employers come to us, and when they leave the meeting, they're kind of like, are they for real? Yes, we're for real. We want to know what you need, when you need it, and we're going to meet the deadline, and oftentimes we're going to be ahead of schedule. I think that's really important. Working at the speed of government, although people may be chuckling inside, we think that is being ready before you expect it, before you need it, and then we're begging the question, what's next, and we're ready for more. So when we talk about working across agencies, that is the expectation working with our organization, that we're waiting on you, not the other way around.
Yeah, I think for us, the coordination and intentional collaboration, because I think it's important to use that word intentional again, because not accidental collaboration where, oh, we've kind of arrived that we need to work on something together, but being intentional about how do we provide holistic support and job worker supports for individuals is very key. So working across other state agencies, we had to come to the realization that we're all serving a common person. It's not someone labor is serving or human services is serving because they may need food assistance or they're food insecure, but we're serving a person. And what does everyone have in their toolbox that can help the person? And it doesn't matter where they go to get help, we have to be able to help them holistically while we see them. That is so critical. The worst thing we can do is to have someone who is already fearful about how to begin a career journey, to send them across town when they're already resource depleted to get a solution to their problem. So serving the person wholly and completely when you see them, no matter the door they come in, is very important. So we try to collapse as state agencies to say, if you're serving the person, serve to the need, not to your organization, not to your funding stream, but serve to the need. And so we found that doing that across agencies is helpful, but going back to the community, the grassroots support is also key, because what we found is that we're not short of people that have a passion for workforce in this space. We just have to be able to say, it doesn't matter who gets credit. What matters is that the person gets a job and they get a new path forward. And that's what really matters. So there has to be egos off the table, titles off the table, organization identifiers off the table, but just really serving the needs of the person. I mean, that sounds really Pollyanna, but that's true. That's how we're all gonna accomplish this. The need is great, so there's no room for credit. We just gotta make sure people are getting help. I'll just say very quickly, we see labor force participation is really suffering. In Tennessee, our labor force participation hovers around 61 to 62%. That's still a lot of people that are disengaged from the workforce. Where are they? And so that's why we can't run the risk of saying, if they don't walk through our door, oh, well, we gotta find them and we gotta re-engage them back into the workforce. And so it's really incumbent upon all of us to really look for those non-traditional sources of workforce, potential workforce, to be able to help. And so everyone's a partner in the workforce endeavor.
Great. All right, we're going to move to questions from the audience. Does anyone have a question? Yes.
Sorry, the 62% you just said, that's able-bodied people able to work.
So the 62% are people that are actively participating. We certainly know that there are able bodies that are not participating in the workforce. And so we have to find out why, and is there barrier mitigation strategies to help them get back in workforce? We're really concerned with the numbers that we see right now because women are leaving the workforce, and we can tie that directly into dwindling childcare. We know there are places across our state and really across the country where there are childcare deserts, and particularly with this shift of kind of slowly getting back to the office, you're asking people to decide between family and work. And so that's starting to have some negative impact on labor force participation.
Other questions from yes, sir.
Yeah. So you mentioned, going for employers to go to non-traditional sources, but I think one of the things, the challenges that I've seen sort of in that is that it is non-traditional, and getting, especially larger organizations and big massive ships, it's hard to get them to steer in a different direction. How have you gotten employers to sort of change the whole mind frame of going to non-traditional sources when there's been sort of all the politics may be involved in just doing the traditional sources?
That's a very good question. I'll answer that. Michael may have some thoughts as well, but what we say is allow us to be an intermediary for you. Because oftentimes you have people that are big-hearted, but there's no strategy. So it takes heart and strategy. And so lean on us as a public workforce system to really be that intermediary to help be conveners of those conversations so that we have a clear understanding of what your needs are, and then we can kind of work with those organizations to make sure that they're sourcing and providing to you the right kind of person. We tell folks all the time, don't just send Joe because you think Joe's a great guy and Joe needs a job. Joe may not be the right fit. And so it can't be heartstrings. You got to think about an employer's purse strings. And so as an intermediary, we can have that conversation both ways to make sure that you're getting what it is that you need.
In this order, innovation, action, and a plan of completion. That's really important because as a provider of skills and tools and degrees and certifications to the employer, it does matter. But as I said before, you want this done in a fashion that is more efficient and expedient than we're known for in higher education. The innovation component means that you're open to the idea of how do we move this up and scale it up so it's effective and efficient. The coming to the table for the plan of action, we can't walk into the room without an idea and understanding. So I personally have a 2-meeting rule, and our team has a broader scope of that, but the 2-meeting rule is the first meeting is to make sure that our values align and that we can meet your expectations. And we know that on the second meeting, we're going to come up with that plan of action about when the expectations need to be met. I disappear and go to the next group, and our team starts to work on making that come to action, excuse me. The third thing about the assessment component of it, we don't want to wait until something goes wrong to assess whether or not we need to change the way that we're steering the boat, as you mentioned. We want to find those things in real time as best as possible so that we can make the shift and make more importantly, meet your needs as the employer so that if that's a curriculum change, is that an opportunity for our faculty to actually come and shadow somebody as that person who's going to build the curriculum so they understand it better? So we want to move in real time with you. Does that get you all the people that you want in the time that you want? The answer is no. But what it does do, it shows a commitment from both parties that we can move this forward, and we're doing it collaboratively, as Denise said. So getting to what you want, it is more than possible and plausible. It's just a matter of let's set the tone, and then we can move as fast as we're both willing to move.
I think we are about out of time, but if we could ask each of you just to give one piece of advice for employers, and we'll end with that real quickly. Whoever wants to jump in first.
I would say understand truly the employee base. As we develop programs in order to try to help our team members, we call them team members, employees, just really rolling up the sleeves and really understanding their experience will then help us develop strategic plans that will help enable them to get what they need from an employment standpoint and what we need as employers.
I would say go back and work with your HR team on your job descriptions. We find that there are a lot of job descriptions that are written to be exclusionary and not inclusive. Do you really need what you think you need when you say you need a 4-year degree? To make sure they're focused on skills and competencies, because that could be allowing some folks to go, I'm never going to qualify for this, and they don't even bother to apply.
Have an understanding that higher education is workforce development, and as presidents and to the folks that work across the organization in maintenance, we all understand that whoever is coming there is coming for a skill to go to work. And so we understand that, and we want you to know that we understand that we are prepared to meet your expectations because they're not demands. This is preparing the economic and community development and success for Tennesseans specifically because this is where we are today, but for the country.
Thank you. And please join me in thanking Denise, Michael, and Tracy. All right.
All right, thank you all. That was wonderful. Lots of really great nuggets today. The two that struck me the hardest, one was the concept of first-time workers. That's not something I've really thought about before. We think about first-time high school grads and college grads, but that's almost feels so insurmountable of a challenge to overcome. But I really like this idea of engaging with non-traditional partners. I think all the companies in the room, we think about high school engagement. We have great on-campus recruiting, but I don't think I've ever talked to the Boys and Girls Clubs about professional recruiting in Milwaukee. And that's something I'll take home today. So thank you very much. To close out today, I want to echo something Joe said at the beginning, which is check out iv2050.org. You can see more about the Infrastructure Vision 2050 initiative, and you can rebuild the great Brookings report, Rebuild with Purpose. It was our hope that report would impact elected officials as they went about crafting the infrastructure bill and implementing the infrastructure bill. But it was also our hope that it would spark conversations like the one that we've just had today. So again, I want to thank all the panelists and moderators for joining us today. I want to thank our friends at the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce and the Brookings Institute. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. And we've got a bar set up, and I'd ask you to please stick around and have some more conversations with our panelists and with each other as we close out our event today. So thank you very much.